Hey everybody, what's up? My name is Corey Cudney, and I am just an editor. But today I have with me somebody who, honestly, if you like animated shows in like the adult-oriented demographic, probably seen something that this guy's worked on. We're talking Harley Quinn, we're talking Rick and Morty, we're talking Axe Cop, Lucas Bros. He's even worked on dope documentaries like Detour, Tenacious Documentary, which we will get into since I've actually never talked to anybody who's done a documentary. So that's super cool. So I'm very excited to hop into another round of Just an Editor podcast. So please welcome our guest today, Mr. James Atkinson.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Corey.
Yeah, thank you so much for responding. Like, honestly, I'm going to be super transparent. I had two people respond to me very quickly, and you were immediately one of them. And I was like, man, I always like that. It makes me feel way better. I always feel weird cold emailing people, you know?
I think you're really brave. I'm scared to cold email people.
Oh, man. Well, that makes me feel way better, honestly. If somebody like you that's been doing this forever, you feel the same anxiety that I do, that I'm like, this guy's going to hate me. Like,
I don't hate you, and I definitely feel anxiety every day. I mean, that's why I am, working a job where I'm in a dark room, hiding from people. Yeah.
As long as I can stay, in a soundproof room, let's just stay there. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So I have, like I mentioned right before we started recording, I pulled up like IMDb and grabbed some notes and stuff. But I have done, because there's honestly no way for me to do this digging. It would be kind of awkward if I did. But I want to go all the way back to the beginning of how you got into editing. What was your big inspirations and what kind of got you started as an editor?
I think my origin story is not too different from a lot of other people. Basically, when I was a kid, my friends and I liked making stupid videos with each other. And we quickly learned the secret magic to making a good video was to edit out the bad parts. And we didn't really know how to do it very well. We were just sort of doing in-camera editing.
Oh, nice.
But I remember there was a kid at my school who had a digital edit system, and we saw a little bit of how it worked. And then eventually I was in college and I was studying computer science because I thought I want to work in video games. And after some time doing that, I realized this is too hard. This is really difficult. This is an engineering degree. And I was like, well, I already took out the student loan. How do I get out of here and survive? And I was like, film, that's an easy major.
Nice.
and I saw there were also production classes. And I thought I love making videos. And I love, it's fun to make something and have an audience watch it. And one of the production classes, I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I do remember there were post-production classes that were slightly more accessible because I guess people were scared of the technical stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, it was like a vacation from computer science. So yeah, I started doing
so
film.
You welcomed it.
Yeah. So I started doing production and post-production. And from that point on, I met professors who were making their own things for PBS and stuff. And they basically, I was at UC Santa Cruz, and there were lots of weird subversives in the faculty there. And they basically taught us here's how to sneak your subversive content, onto screen so you can, warp the fabric of American society.
Nice. So what led you, going out of Santa Cruz and everything, what was your first gig out of college that had to do with production? Or did you get into production immediately, or was there a little bit of a grind out of college?
I had kind of a weird arc into production. My summer job every year in college was being a computer camp counselor. And I would teach, because I could relate to the little nerds. They were nice, and I was a bigger nerd. I would teach. One of the classes I taught was video production, and I would teach my little students. Some of them would be around 12 years old, how to write, direct, shoot, and edit a short video in 5 days. So we would start on Monday, and on Friday they would screen it for the whole camp.
Oh, that's
Uh,
super cool.
yeah, so it was like a really fun job, and I grew up in Los Angeles. Um, and yeah, the cool thing about this computer camp, like I really do recommend a job like this to, like, I don't know if any like younger people are listening, like college age people, because a lot of these computer camps, like they are at college campuses all over the country. So you can like pick where you want to work. So maybe you're going to school in the Midwest, but you want to spend your summer on the East Coast. There's probably a computer camp that can let you do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that would like make total sense because you're getting, experience in it and also teaching, like you said earlier, teaching the little ones, the little nerds.
And I guess I just lucked out. In my last summer, I decided to go back to Los Angeles, and I said, like, okay, I'll teach video classes at UCLA. And I didn't have like a grand strategy or anything. And after 4 years of being a camp counselor, I was like pretty decent, and I'd learned how to be like a patient communicator with kids. And there was one kid in one of my classes near the very end. He basically said he was, like a little troublemaker the whole week. He was a real fun kid. And then at the very end of the week, he was like, James, I like how you handled yourself. It was like he had changed character on the last day. He's like, and I'm going to recommend you to my father.
Oh my God.
And his dad was an executive at what do you call it? The Jim Henson Company.
What?
And his
my God.
His dad was like a really cool guy. And so I got my first job, like basically assistant editing, like on puppet stuff.
Wow. I like that he was like, he had his own character redemption arc that like formed into your arc where he's like, you know what? I'm really proud of yourself. I'm really proud of you. I'm going to help you out.
Yeah, I guess I'm glad I was nice to all those kids.
Yeah, that goes to show. Just be nice to kids. And like
it would have felt good to be a big jerk to those kids.
Honestly, yeah, there's not a whole lot better in the world than being jerks to kids.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So you're at the Jim Henson Company. Well, what did you say your first assistant editing gig was?
They had like a variety of projects going on there. I think that was like after they had sold the Muppets to Disney. So they had money and they were doing like all kinds of cool experiments. And eventually I was assistant editing on their like 3D motion capture shows.
Oh, wow.
So they actually had like Muppeteers working like a crazy like remote control thing that would control characters in real time. And basically like if you had a character, the character would be like the head would be controlled by a Muppeteer and the body would be controlled by like an actor wearing tights with mocap dots on them, like running around a stage.
Yeah.
And they would actually shoot stuff as if it was a live production with like a director and cameras. And, they were looking at monitors with like a real time render of what was happening. And this was like before Avatar. So that was a cool, like, weird project for me to start on. Yeah, I worked on like multiple shows that used that system.
Yeah, so for something like that, are you getting, is there like a totally different, I would imagine there's like a totally different department that's getting like the tracking data. You as the AE, like what does that really translate for you? Or are you just cutting like the scenes that are already like completely animated?
Well, I mean, they treated it like a live production, so I would get takes.
Oh,
and
yeah, okay.
So it was very strange because like when I got like basically dailies, and so the first show I was on, like it was a family of like little badgers, and so you'd actually see like the badgers talking to each other before they called action.
Oh, yeah.
And so you'd see it'd be like, "Hey, did you have a good time last night?" Like, "Yeah, I actually did." I went out to drinks with friends. You'd see these badgers, talking nonsense, and then the director would call action, and they act out their scene.
Yeah.
And it's fun. Like a couple times I would go on set and, like I don't recognize the actors because I'm just used to seeing badgers.
Yeah, the little badgers. Yeah. You're like, I know your voice anywhere.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So out of Jim Henson, where do you go?
Oh my gosh. Well, now I'm literally looking at my IMDb, but I'm also
just a check.
I'm also going to search my memory. And so we're going back into the early 2000s. So the chronology might not be totally accurate. in my foggy mind. But I know one thing. One thing I worked on was I was an assistant editor on the behind the scenes documentaries for the Lord of the Rings movies.
Oh, like the official ones that would be in the bonus features?
Yeah, like Peter Jackson had like an incredible system where he really treated like the behind the scenes department as like just as important as like any other department, like just as important as like VFX or,
Yeah.
sound or whatever. So he really invested in that. And like, they recorded a huge amount of material, and this like, I don't know if they still have tape libraries nowadays, but I literally would go into like a giant tape library and, like find specific clips for editors.
Oh, wow. So for something like that, do they have a select in mind that's like, oh, on, this Tuesday or whatever, there's a really good moment where so-and-so does that? Or are you just watching tapes for hours on end to try to find good selects?
So take whatever I say with a grain of salt, because this was however many years ago. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if this was like 15 or 17 years ago, but I do remember some of it was like they had like a database program, and I would just be like searching for certain keywords. I can think of one specific thing that people would ask for. Like, I remember I was assisting on a documentary about sound design in Return of the King. And I think, what was it? The Nazgul, those weird wraiths flying around.
Yeah.
Terrorizing the hobbits. They have like a horrifying screech. And I remember the sound of the screech is actually, what do you call it? A stallion like ejaculating.
Oh my God.
And so I remember I was told like, yeah, find the clip of like a recordist
stallion
went to a farm and like is pointing like a shotgun mic at a stallion, like, ejaculating into like a weird tube to collect his essence. So I just remember watching that and thinking like, I never thought I would see something like this.
Yeah, this is not anything that you'd think of when you're teaching the kids over at the counseling. You're like, I'm going to watch a horse ejaculate in just a few years.
And yeah, I mean, I heard the sound and I was like, that is a pretty horrifying sound.
Oh my God.
I give a lot of credit for these sound designers for, being curious people out in the world, finding new horrifying things.
So they just filmed like everything for those movies, it sounds like, behind the scenes wise.
Yeah, it was truly amazing. And it was like shocking to see how much work Peter Jackson did on those movies. Like, it really looked like D-Day or something, like a military campaign, everything that, he was managing.
Yeah, that is absolutely. Did you do the behind the scenes for all three of the movies, or just Return of the King?
I was just on Return of the King.
Got you. Okay. Man, that's still absolutely insane.
So yeah, that gave me more respect for, I always like blockbuster movies, but that really made me appreciate like the scale of the logistics, just literally seeing all the raw footage.
Yeah, something like that. Did they give you any freedom? Like, could you like just be like, hey, what were they doing on Monday, whatever? Like, could you just watch that, or was it pretty stringent of like, okay, you are looking for this?
I mean, I was a night shift editor, and I remember like I would ride my bike to the office, and then I was just there all night, and nobody's watching what I'm doing. So yeah, absolutely. Like, if I wanted to watch some stupid tape by myself, nobody was going to tell me not to do it, but I had like a checklist of tasks to finish before the morning ended. And you just want to finish your list of tasks as quickly as possible, so you don't have to spend all night.
But that is crazy. That's a really cool thing that you could just be like, hey man, we'll see what Elijah Wood was doing on take 36 of this,
One weird thing I noticed, like specifically watching footage of Elijah Wood, I watched all the press junket stuff that all the actors do. By the way, I have no idea if this is interesting for the podcast. So
this is fascinating for me. I'm loving it.
Okay. But yeah, one thing I noticed, like at the press junkets, the actors get asked the same question 9 million times.
Yeah.
Like, I think the question was like, I can't believe I still remember this. Like, what was it like wearing the prosthetic feet as a hobbit? And I look at Elijah Wood, and every single time he was asked that question by the press, he always treated it like, oh, what a charming, delightful, surprising question. And he really looked like he was like tickled, like, well, it was like this. And I was like, that is truly like half the job of being an actor, is like, can you actually pretend to be enthused during like these incredibly like time consuming press junkets.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of horror stories about those press junkets where, like you're saying, it's just the same questions over and over again, and it's fat. That's really cool about Elijah though, because I've heard stories of some actors just being kind of jerks about it, and by the end just being like, "Hey man, like whatever." That's super cool that he would like give the time to them and be like, "Hey man, that is a fantastic question. I am so glad that you asked that."
Yeah, like I totally like he's you know, this is the corniest thing for me to say, but like he seemed like a genuinely nice person, and yeah, you just realize like, oh, that's part of professionalism is like you're at work when you're doing the press.
Oh yeah, being a chill guy.
Yeah.
So what do you remember past the Lord of the Rings documentary? What comes after that for you?
So let's see. I assisted edited on like a bunch of different shows, like Disney Channel shows, like stuff that was sort of connected with the Jim Henson Company. I was freelance. I was living in LA. I was riding my bike around town, you know, having a good time, and I would assist edit on like weird little comedy things, like an HBO pilot called Derek and Simon, directed by Bob Odenkirk. And let's see. Oh yeah, then eventually one day, you know, after doing lots of assistant editing jobs, I was assistant editing on a sketch comedy show for Comedy Central called Nick Swardson's Pretend Time.
Oh yeah, I watched it. I've seen that. I've heard of it.
Yeah, that was a fun show to work on.
Oh yeah.
And a cool thing, like if you're ever an assistant editor, and lots of assistant editors ask this question, they're like, how do I get bumped up? And I guess the answer is like, nobody wants to bump you up. They want you to be an assistant editor forever. Like it's really like, if you're good at that job, like they love having you there. Like nobody wants to develop your career. Nobody's thinking like, oh man, I really want like Corey to be very successful 10 years from now.
Oh yeah. They're like, he's doing really good for me right now. He'll stay here forever.
Yeah. But I guess like for what it's worth, I'll share like, this is how I did it.
Sure.
I was working on a sketch comedy show, and there was a really talented editor who was cutting sketches that season. But there were some sketches that he was like he just didn't feel like editing. Like he was just not psyched about it. You know, he's got like 100 to get through.
Oh yeah.
So I would like finish my tasks as an assistant editor. And then if there was time left over, or if nobody was kicking me out of the office, I just started cutting, you know, the sketches that he didn't feel like doing.
Oh yeah.
And then I showed him to the editor, and he was like, these are good enough. and yeah, he told the showrunner, and the showrunner is like, well, we could use another editor. So all of a sudden I was doing the work of editing the stuff that the super talented editor didn't feel like doing. And I was happy to do that.
Yeah. So when you're editing this sketch comedy show versus like this documentary, or even going back to like the Jim Henson stuff, like does it feel different to be cutting like sketch comedy? Because I would imagine that you would have to try to develop like a pretty good flow within the scene. So does that feel different, you know, to do that versus the documentaries and stuff?
I guess the way I was looking at it is like, all you got to do is make somebody laugh. Like it's a sketch show. You got to make somebody laugh.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like you're making a dish from a recipe, and sometimes you follow the recipe perfectly, and it's not, you know, it's like it's not funny yet.
Yeah.
And you have to play around with the footage. And I guess because I had made lots of stupid videos with my friends growing up, I was just very comfortable thinking like, well, I'll just play with this footage in any way possible. And I know the showrunner's taste, like what will make the showrunner laugh.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wasn't always right, but I was down to play around with that process. And that was very handy in that environment of working on a sketch comedy show.
That's definitely something I've been told a lot before, where it's like, if you can edit comedy and you have a pretty good sense of humor, that just naturally kind of lends to other genres as well, where it's like, okay, you've nailed down comedic timing and the flow of comedy. So you can probably do a pretty good dramatic piece, not necessarily, but you could probably lend a little bit of that talent that direction as well.
I guess it's also like a very simple test. Like you can play your comedy sketch for like an audience of people who don't know you.
Yeah.
And if they don't laugh, you failed. Like
Yeah.
it's harder to test, I don't know, drama. Like I don't know. They'll tell you like, oh, that was very good, but you don't really know if they really liked it.
Yeah. But if they get like an actual laugh out of it, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah. You can't.
Yeah. A bunch of strangers are not going to fake laughs for you.
Yeah, exactly. So going out of like Comedy Central and everything, how do you land from Nick Swardson and Comedy Central going into what perked my ears or perked my eyes, I guess, when I saw it, this Tenacious D documentary. I've been wanting to ask about this. I've decided that now is the time.
Sure. Well, okay. The Tenacious D documentary was directed by a friend of mine, Jeremy Connor. And like Jeremy Connor's story is, I think, like really educational for, I don't know. I imagine a young person is listening right now. I feel like an old man. So Jeremy and I went to high school together in LA. And I think one of his jobs after college was he was Jack Black's assistant.
Oh, nice.
And even while he was Jack Black's assistant, like Jeremy was just always making shorts. He was just always making like comedy shorts on his own time.
Yeah.
Even when, he was like getting like Jack Black like a salad or something. And apparently like Jack Black was like a completely reasonable person to work for. So Jeremy actually had free time to make shorts.
Oh, yeah.
And eventually, if I remember correctly, I think one of Jeremy's shorts like won an award at like a film festival. So Jeremy was going to like leave his assistant job and like get an agent and pursue like his career, like actually making films. And like, Jeremy is, by the way, now he's like a successful director. And Jack Black was really smart and he was about to go on tour with Tenacious D. And I think he said like, hey, how about if you're going to quit, how about you stick around and direct this tour that we're about to go on?
Oh, yeah.
So that's what Jeremy did. And he like Iron Manned it, basically, I think being his own camera operator, just shooting this whole tour of the band. And I already knew Jeremy, not just through high school, but I had edited for him. Jeremy had edited that pilot I mentioned earlier called Derek and Simon for Bob Odenkirk.
One, yeah.
So yeah, I ended up, me and a couple other friends of Jeremy worked as editors on that documentary. And we kind of figured out our workflow on the fly making that.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
And it was very handy because like, I think I remember like I knew, like a technical director from the Jim Henson Company.
Yeah.
So I said like, hey, me and some friends are going to edit a documentary. I guess we need like a NAS or a SAN. Like, I don't know what it's called. And this like, guy who could, charge like a huge amount of money for his information. Like at the time, it was not super clear, like how to make a SAN or a NAS or whatever the hell we ended up using. Mm-hmm. But, I just gave him a quote. I was like, we have, like low amount of money and we want to be able to have shared storage editing. And he figured out a solution for us.
So that for that project specifically, was that, it sounds like that was not so much of like I don't necessarily know how to put it, but it's like, it sounds like more of a passion project of like, you're not necessarily going to an office every day to do it. Or was there like an office that you set up to go to every day? You're just working off of like a home computer? How was that edited?
We worked out of Jack Black's bungalow at Universal Studios.
Oh, dope. Okay.
So yeah, like if you are a cool movie star, like a studio gives you, it looks like a little house, like in the back of the movie studio. Like if you're ever, at the Universal tour or like driving in a golf cart somewhere and you see a bunch of little houses, like those are nice offices for important people.
Oh, okay. So Jack Black was kind of just letting y'all use that one for the documentary style?
Yeah, and I don't know what he was shooting at the time, but because he's a movie star, like I just assumed like he's just never actually at the bungalow.
Yeah.
Because he's always shooting a movie somewhere. So he wasn't at the bungalow. It was just like three dirtbags like me and my friends in his bungalow editing a documentary.
Dang, that's the life there for a minute. That's how long did it take y'all to cut down that much footage for the documentary?
Oh gosh, I don't remember the exact schedule because this was 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I do remember, it took a really long time, and it was the process of working on that documentary kind of taught me a lot for future projects, because it really came down to like, we would just talk with Jeremy, who was there on the whole tour. We would just ask him like, hey, what happened on, like, he would just give us like a little diary of like, here's interesting things that happened, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
And we just basically started like, well, let's edit the most interesting things that happened.
Did you guys kind of get to, I guess, like weave the narrative in the edit, or did he have like a narrative that Jeremy kind of wanted to tell going into it?
I think we figured it out on the fly.
Got you. Okay.
And, who knows if I'm remembering this correctly because it's 12 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think the way things kind of start with something as straightforward as a tour documentary is you just find the most interesting scenes, you assemble all the most interesting scenes, and then you put them all together in chronological order.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you're like, well, here they went from A to B, and here's everything that happened.
Yeah.
And sure, so we did that, and then like the real work of like with lots of note cards, started happening, because now you want to actually craft a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. And sometimes you have to screw around with chronology and like combine certain scenes, or maybe you want to use a music performance and like turn a bunch of scenes into a montage over that music performance.
So did you guys get any of like Jack Black's input for any of this, or was this kind of all side stuff, like away from him?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure like Jeremy talked with Jack Black, but really we were just talking with Jeremy.
With Jeremy, okay. Yeah, that's I just imagine, for whatever reason in my head, I just imagine Jack Black walking into the bungalow like, oh yeah, you guys are still here. That's right. How are y'all? Like just chilling in there.
I think maybe we saw him once and like he didn't call security on us. So like, it's cool.
Yeah, that's good plus.
No, like he like knew like, oh, he was like, hi guys. He knew we were supposed to be there. So that was cool.
So for stuff like that, where it's you like, you're working with your friend and stuff like that, were you guys kind of going by a semi-strict schedule of like, I'm here from 8 to 6 or whatever, or were, there are a lot of, I'm just going to chill here for a little bit. Jeremy's hanging out. We're just going to watch footage for whatever, 12 hours or whatever.
I don't remember specifically what we did, but in general, in like my whole career, like there's always a weird blurry line between like, are you friends or are you professionals? So I think it makes sense to have clear rules.
Okay.
Like we work from 10 to 7 and, we have an hour-long lunch break. It can be as simple as that. Mm-hmm. I think that's how you stay friends, even if you're working together.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was wondering. Cause I feel like that could be a slippery slope at a little bit where you're like, hey man, like I've been here all day. I'm tired now. Like, so that's cool. That's really good advice, to set boundaries of, like you said, these are the working hours that we have set up.
Yeah, I think it's really handy for all parties involved.
So to go back a little bit, you mentioned the HBO pilot again, and it popped a question into mind of, as the editor, at least me, you try not to get like attached to any of these projects, but it inevitably happens a lot for me, at least personally.
Sure.
So for something like that, when you're cutting a pilot of a show, if it doesn't get picked up, is that like a bummer, or do you just kind of move on? You're like, it's life. I'm a freelancer. That's what happens.
I guess both, because you have to care about something to do a good job on it.
Yeah.
But I think you also have to acknowledge, like, what do you call it? You have to like sort of say the serenity prayer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Internally, like accept the things that you don't have control over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's totally unpredictable, like what will work out and won't work out.
Has there ever been like when you're cutting, you're like, this is not gonna work, and then like the higher ups just love it, or even like reverse, where you just know it's something's gonna go over well, and then it just doesn't get picked up at all?
Uh, yeah, I've been totally proven wrong. Like either way.
Nice. Okay.
So like, yeah, I guess I've learned like a little bit of humility, and I
Yeah.
think it's like super hard. Like we all get tunnel vision.
Yeah.
But I think I've been surprised enough that I try to. Who knows what my humility slider is like inside? But I don't know. Maybe I have like 20% humility and like 80% jerk. Who knows?
So going out of the documentary, we're gonna skip a little bit. I assume we're skipping a little bit to how, because it seems like, looking at like IMDb and everything like that, it kind of seems like that we hit a point and somewhere you got into this like really cool stretch of like awesome animated shows. Cause like looking at it, it's like I mentioned at the top of the show, like Lucas Bros Moving Co., X Cop, you've got like the Rick and Morty's and Harley Quinn. How does that, like, are other projects interwoven into there, or have you just kind of like gotten into the animated scene and it's like that's where we're at?
Okay, so here's what happened. And there's like I'm going to tell you my specific story, and then there's like a general version of this that I think is more handy for
Oh,
anybody who is just starting out.
cool. Yeah.
Um, so at the same time that I was working all these jobs like Jim Henson and Tenacious D and stuff,
Mhm.
um, I was also, like riding my bike around LA, like looking for cool things happening in LA. And one thing going on at the time was this local comedy video like event. It was a monthly event called Channel 101. And Channel 101 is still happening now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it's, I'm old now, so I don't know if it's the coolest, most relevant thing happening in LA right now. But yeah, Channel 101 was basically, or is, it was like a totally free, low budget event, screening like 5-minute little mini TV shows just made by like normal people, screened in front of a bar. And all the drunk people in the bar would vote for the TV shows they liked most.
Nice.
And yeah, I think I saw like some of the videos online and I just thought they were really funny. And I went over to like one of the screenings and I just watched like a bunch of the videos, like I think like Yacht Rock
Oh.
was one of the videos I saw my first night there.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought like, this is like incredibly funny. And I told all my friends about it. And I was like, we have to start going to these like screenings and like maybe we should make videos. And a really talented friend of mine named Ryan Nagata, who I think was finishing at USC Film School, he made a short for Channel 101 called Your Magic Touched Me, which was just like an incredibly stupid series about like a magician solving people's problems with like sleight of hand and magic. And it was like, Ryan's very funny and it was like a very stupid video. And like the drunk people in the bar like loved it and it went over really well. So by like working with Ryan and my friends and like getting to know the people at Channel 101, I had fallen into something that I didn't realize was really helpful, which is like a community of people who like the same kind of stuff that I like.
Yeah.
And I didn't totally realize like Channel 101 was created by Dan Harmon and Rob Schraub. Like Rob Schraub directed the Sarah Silverman program and like a bunch of cool comedies. I mean, this was like after Channel 101.
Oh, yeah.
And Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, who I also met at Channel 101, like they went on to make Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, basically by getting to know this community of like weirdos making videos for free, I met like a whole bunch of like passionate people who deeply cared about weird, stupid things.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that like really helped change my career.
Dang. Yeah, that's a really cool. I was literally just thinking it as you were going, that it's very cool as we've continued talking, because so many of these jobs is like, oh, well, I worked with this guy before and he helped me get here. And so it's a very cool common theme of your career so far of lifting each other up, I guess, which sounds super corny to say. But that's just a really cool theme, and Channel 101 playing into that perfectly.
Yeah, that's 100% like the reason why I've been able to pay my rent for, what do you call it, for 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been really lucky to meet like talented, nice people who have helped me out, and I try to pay it back by helping out other people. And you realize like a huge amount of entertainment is based on that system.
Yeah. So once you get into this, like this section of animated shows that I referenced a little bit earlier,
Sure.
How does editing, because I feel like for me at least, I could be completely misconstruing this, but for me at least, editing an animated show sounds like a gargantuan task versus editing like a live action piece where you can play around with the handles and stuff of footage, where it seems like animation doesn't necessarily have that play and give in the actual edit. So what is it like, I guess, to edit something like I mentioned earlier, the comedy section of it, but now throwing on the animation side of that as well?
That's a really good question. So here, I'll just say like I fell into animation editing because what do you call it? All the people who I met at Channel 101, they got a TV deal to make a sketch comedy show called Acceptable TV. And Justin Roiland was making an animated segment for Acceptable TV, and he needed help editing stuff. And I was very lucky to get, they were just calling like everybody they knew from Channel 101 for like all hands on deck. So I helped with one of the animated segments. So that's part of how I learned, how animation editing works. Mm-hmm. And then the other way that I learned was a long time ago, I went to a screening of Finding Nemo. And they had like Pixar people there, like, cool. The filmmakers there.
Oh, yeah.
And a kid in the audience, like after the movie, stood up and asked and said like, hey, I saw there were editor credits. Like, what does an editor do in an animated film? And I thought to myself, like, that's a really smart kid, because I never thought about answering that question.
Yeah.
I never thought or posing that question. Mm-hmm. And, the Finding Nemo people, I don't remember, it was a million years ago. Maybe it was the director. I don't know.
Yeah.
Basically explained how animated editing works. And so I'm going to summarize it right now. And every show is different. What I'm about to describe works for like script driven animated shows, like say like an episode of The Simpsons or Rick and Morty, or like a Pixar thing where you write a script first. There are other shows that don't necessarily start with a written script, like Adventure Time, I hear, is board driven and works differently. But okay, I'll go with script driven. Okay, so step one, you write a script. Step two, you record voices, like actually saying all the lines. And maybe some of the voices are the actors that you've cast, and maybe some of the voices are just people in the office, and you're just temping out all the lines. Mm-hmm. After that, you edit together that audio and you make a radio play, and maybe you even put some sound design in there. So it's sort of a 1930s style radio play, like, I don't know, like Zorro or The Shadow, or, so you can tell like when these two characters are talking, are they sitting in a quiet living room, or are they in a speeding car? Are they running full speed down a hallway while, like bullets are flying by them? Like, that's why the sound design is helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Then after you do the sound design, then you make an animatic where you actually give that radio play to artists, and the artists sort of use the rough timing of that animatic, and they draw like a very simple black and white cartoon over the radio play. And then you start editing that animatic, because maybe you're like, oh, well, maybe the lines in this scene could change order, or like maybe the scenes could change order, or maybe I'll like mat out this character's facial expression and use a facial expression from another shot, so his delivery is slightly different. Like, all of a sudden, you can start making big changes during this animatic edit portion of the process.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I was at that Pixar screening, I think they explained that they spent a long time in that animatic stage, and they sort of if I remember correctly, they said like that's the magic of like why their movies are good, because they just iterate and do a million revisions
Oh, yeah.
in animatic. And so sometimes like the artist and the editor are in the same room and there's like a microphone in there too. And they're pitching new lines and somebody's drawing new shots and you're just sort of making a scene on the fly right there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like sometimes it's more thought out than that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a little bit of an experience helping out on that radio play. And then, yeah, I think I heard about Fox was starting this new studio called, I guess just Fox ADHD. And it was going to make, they're hiring like, it was started by people from Adult Swim, from Cartoon Network, and they were going to make like cool adult animation for Fox. And I heard about this opportunity and I had a tiny bit of experience. And so I thought like, yeah, I want to go in and, try to get this job. And I got sort of thrown into this system after successfully interviewing there. They tried me out and that's where I got a lot of my animation experience. It was a really cool boot camp at Fox ADHD.
Okay.
The whole studio was in one building at, in Hollywood, next to the old Cat and Fiddle bar. Yeah, it was mostly like, they just had, I don't know, like 100, 200 like young 20-something-year-old kids, like drawing on Cintiqs, like in big bull rooms. And they had like a few editors like me, and they had like writers. And yeah, they just had everything you needed for an animation studio in one building. I really learned while working there, like how to edit animation well and like very quickly, because I started with radio plays for a show called High School USA, and then before I knew it I was multitasking, doing lots of different tasks on lots of different shows at the same time.
That's super cool. Then, so like I noticed in on the IMDb, it says for the Rick and Morty credit, it says that you are dialogue editor. So is that what the credit is for like the radio play that you're referring to? Is that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's mostly what I did at Rick and Morty. I was like a dialogue editor, and then I was an animatic editor on one episode.
Oh, okay.
Interdimensional Cable 2, which was a very fun episode to work on.
Is the animatics, is it a little bit more different for those episodes? Because aren't those episodes mostly completely on the fly, like it isn't scripted out, or am I mistaken on that?
No, you're right. Like I'll describe the process. So like, let's fast forward out of Fox ADHD.
Yeah.
And I hear that Rick and Morty is hiring, and it's just a dialogue editor position,
mm-hmm.
which is like, at ADHD, it was cool because like we did everything. We did dialogue all the way up to final picture, like final animation. But I loved Rick and Morty so much as a show that I was like, I will absolutely like go to Rick and Morty to do dialogue editing.
Yeah.
So I went there, and one thing I had sort of already learned from ADHD and kind of refined further working at Rick and Morty was just like pacing, and that show is paced like really fast. And I learned a lot about like, for me, that show, it felt like I was learning how to, you want to deliver it like exposition as like cleanly as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that in a really elegant way, you buy time for like characters to just riff and do like crazy long improvisations. Cause yeah, you only have like 22 minutes to work with. And I mean, I love having like crazy, what do you call it? Improvisation in TV. It's fun to show the viewer, like have the viewer feel like things are really going off the rails. I joined in season 2, and I worked on a few episodes, and then Interdimensional Cable 2 was coming up. And I remember, I don't know if I'm talking out of school, but I remember the way the episode was framed was like, let's let Justin like really have fun in this episode and do whatever he wants. So yeah, like that episode is sort of like 50% scripted, 50% improvised.
Nice.
And I remember the framing story is that Jerry has like lost his penis or like his penis got shot off or something.
Yeah, right up in the hospital.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's all scripted. And then he's watching like weird shows on the, oh no, he's not watching weird shows on the TV. Rick and Morty are watching shows in the waiting room. And those are all like insane improvised shows.
Yeah.
And I think the process for how they recorded those shows was a bunch of the writers and like Justin Friends just like wrote like short prompts. And Justin was just in the VO booth like all day and just went through, I don't know, I think like 100 or like 75
Oh my gosh.
of the prompts. And then he would just improvise like very weird stories.
Yeah.
And then like somebody gave me a list of like what they thought were the best things that, you know, the best responses. And that,
Yeah.
and I think they gave this episode to me because they were like, let's leave Lee alone. Like Lee is the main editor of Rick and Morty. They're like, Lee has important things to do. Let's let James edit like the total nonsense improvisation. And I really enjoyed it. And I had lots of fun going through, you know, 75 to 100 sketches. And just really, I just made like lots of like super overproduced radio plays with like music and sound effects. And I love finding like weird music from like old music libraries, like, you know, like strange industrial, like saxophone music from like 1991. And yeah, I got to work a bit with the directors and the animatic artists. And it was like a real fun collaborative process to put together like improvised nonsense into a crazy show.
Does that kind of the Rick and Morty style, I guess, carry over pretty well into like Harley Quinn, which seems to be the most recent credit that I see? Because that watching, I also really enjoy Harley Quinn. Watching that, like you called out for Rick and Morty, very fast pacing, whereas Harley Quinn has a little bit slower of a pacing. So does something like that, you know, those practices carry over pretty well to the Harley Quinn show?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot on Rick and Morty, and it carried over to Harley. I think like again, it's sort of like you want to have a mix of some scenes feel like very clean and clear, and some scenes feel like messy, loose, and spontaneous.
Yeah.
And I love spontaneity in a performance in animation because, again, it's like sort of a way of sort of subconsciously telling the audience like anything can happen. Like if characters can go on like a weird digression and talk over each other and argue with each other and derail the plot for a second. In Rick and Morty, a lot of that was like Justin sort of improvising with himself, playing the two lead characters. And in Harley Quinn, they had like a really cool ensemble cast, and sometimes they would record multiple characters simultaneously.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was really cool when they would do that. Like sometimes they would record like Harley and Poison Ivy together simultaneously. And so you could hear them like talking over each other about like what kind of takeout food they want to order. And yeah, I feel like that is a little bit of an influence from Rick and Morty. Sure. I think like a lot of animated shows have been influenced by at least sometimes getting a little like rougher and looser.
Yeah, that's a good call out, which I personally, like you were calling out earlier, like the spontaneity. I completely agree. That's a very good a style to throw in as well. So for these editing shows, the animated shows, because I know in live action you'll have a lot of times editor on set for some of the recordings. Are you ever in the, not necessarily the booth, but in on the audio recordings for any of these shows, Rick and Morty, Harley Quinn, any of those?
I've been invited to the audio recordings and it's super fun. I really enjoy it. But to be honest, I feel like, well, you don't need like another director in the room in there. Like the director's already there. What am I doing there? I'm either there to just like be yet another person throwing out ideas or yet another person saying, I think that sounds good.
Yeah, that's
so
a good point.
I totally enjoy like getting paid to go to a record, but you know, a guilty part of me is like, is this the most efficient use of my time? You know,
Yeah, exactly. So has
Well, not even my time are like, is this the most efficient use of like the show's money?
yeah. So were you did you guys, because some of the Harley Quinn episodes aired that you worked on aired in 2020. Were you working on any of them this year?
Uh no, I wasn't working on Harley this year. Because animation takes a really long time.
Got you. Yeah.
So let me think. When did I stop working on Harley? Who knows? It might have been 2018 or 2019. I
Ooh.
don't remember. I don't know. I just go through life in like a big blur.
You touched on earlier the leading up to your spot in the pipeline of animation. So is that kind of like regular practice where you'll deliver your section of the edit and then you just won't see it, for a couple of years? Or do you normally get to see the final edit?
Yeah, sometimes you follow it through, like all the way through. Like that's how things worked at like ADHD for Fox. Um, but yeah, on Harley, you could hand stuff off to like another editor who would like handle the final pass,
Mm,
and they have like incredible, talented editors there who did an awesome job.
yeah. So have you been able to kind of secure work and everything in 2020?
Yeah, I've been really lucky and like really fortunate. Um, it's like a scary time to work,
Mm,
but luckily at the same time I've been doing like animated shows. I've also worked on documentary shows, and so like right now I am working on a documentary show that
awesome.
yeah, managed to shoot a lot of footage before getting interrupted by COVID.
So for those, I've been meaning to ask this a million times. For most of these projects, are you working like in Avid? Does the program change per project, I guess, or what program are you like mainly using?
Like every show is different, so it's
Hmm,
usually Avid or Premiere.
got you. Yeah, I was about to ask if Premiere had made its way into the TV world.
Oh yeah, I've worked on lots of TV shows using Premiere.
Nice. That's really cool. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome. And so is that kind of with you being able to secure work this year, are you working from home or are you still having to go to like a bay in an office?
I feel really lucky that I can work from home. I
Nice.
was working on a let's see, back in March before, the pandemic like really hit home.
Hmm.
I was working on a kids show for Netflix.
Oh,
And I remember, yeah, I remember like that week of the 13th, we really realized like, oh, this is going to affect us, not just people we see on TV in other countries.
yeah.
And luckily, I was working with like a really smart post production team, and they figured out how to transfer us from. We were all working on shared storage, like on a team. We were working on a team premiere project in an office, and they
Mm.
transferred us to a cloud
Oh, cool.
system, and we managed to finish the season working on a cloud system. And yeah, since then, all of my jobs have been remote for the rest of the
Nice.
year.
Dang. So for the Netflix, going from everything that we were talking about into Netflix, is that still, this is kind of a silly question. Is that still like, are you technically freelancing, I guess, at this point?
Oh yeah, I'm still freelancing.
Okay. So we mentioned at the very beginning of the show about cold emails. How does that happen
Mhm.
for you at this point of your career where you have like all these awesome credits? Are you cold emailing or do you have somebody who sets up projects for you? How does that work for you?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I don't have an agent, so I'm going to tell you my secret of like how to stay employed, and it's like not even that complicated. Um, I have two email lists in my Gmail.
Hmm.
Uh, One is basically uh, people to ask for jobs,
Yeah.
and it's like all like editors and producers and just like anybody I've met like in my life over the past 17 years who like I would feel comfortable asking, like if I'm finishing a show, I can email them and say like, hey, do you know of anything cool going on? Like I'm going to be available next month.
Mhm.
So that's list number one. And then list number two is like talented people to refer jobs to. I wish I had catchier
Oh.
names for these two lists. Let's say list one is ask for work, and list two is give work to.
Yeah, nice. Yep, yep.
So sometimes, you know, I'll email producers and say that I'm free, or sometimes producers will just email me out of the blue and say, "Hey, are you available next month for an animated show?" And I'm not, but I have my email list of talented editors, and I can refer people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And just by like regularly using those two lists, I've kind of like established a give and take.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess all it means is you're just like emailing like friends and colleagues.
Yeah, that's super fascinating because that is something that I've always wondered is keeping a consistent flow of projects coming. So that's actually super helpful.
Yeah, and the big secret is communication, and I think it's like a neglected side of the job.
Mhm.
And yeah, you know, I want to talk about it more because I think it's super handy for like growing and maintaining your career.
Yeah, that is definitely something that is a little bit harder for some people and everything, and so that is very very good to know that that's like a good key to success is sending out those emails and keeping communication and lines open with people.
Yeah, like I've never gotten a job by like looking for a listing online or like by applying through like official channels. Every
Really?
single job I've ever gotten has been through word of mouth.
Wow, dang, that's awesome. That's crazy.
And yeah, like when I'm working on a show and like a position opens up, like I don't think it gets posted
Yeah.
like anywhere because usually somebody on the crew like knows somebody who they think would be a good fit.
Oh, okay, so it's just pretty much all referrals. That's awesome.
It's all referrals. And I don't know if this is handy information. But I remember one time I asked like a really talented producer who I worked with. Um, I said like, "Hey, do you have any advice for like people who are just starting out in production?"
Mhm.
Because like sometimes like younger people ask me for advice. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm giving them good advice. I don't know. Maybe my advice is stupid. But this producer's really smart, and she told me like be fun to have lunch with because this is a very social, collaborative thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like you can be like an you know a genius alone in the bay, but people have to work with you, and if they don't enjoy spending time with you, if you don't take notes well, if you don't, if you roll your eyes when somebody says, "Can we try something else?" It's you're not going to last that long.
Yeah, that's very funny that you mentioned that specifically because I have been kind of astounded throughout my career at how many times people have been surprised that I am willing to try out everybody's ideas and like be flexible with like my time and ideas and everything. And I'm like, I mean, I'm just editing at the end of the day. Like it's cool. Like I'm happy to do this for you. You know, that's so flexibility is in my short experience something that people really appreciate. So that's a funny thing that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's a cool quality that you have. It's like it's not just handy for like staying employed, but it's also handy for like keeping an open mind
Hmm.
because you know we're not all geniuses, and we could really stand to be a little more open minded because sometimes somebody else's idea turns out to be handy.
Oh yeah, it's always nice to be proven wrong, like you said, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
Well, I think honestly that is a fantastic place to wrap it up. Is with that
cool.
great piece of advice. So thank you so much, James. You have given me personally a ton of really good advice throughout this thing, and I don't even know if that's what I was expecting coming into this, but it's been awesomely educational for me. So hopefully somebody was listening to this and got got some pretty cool stuff out of it as well.
Well, hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so just remember, everybody, if you are listening to this, you can subscribe. We are Just an Editor on pretty much everywhere. I mean, you can find me on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, all that good places. So just remember, shoot us a subscribe. We are going to start pumping out more content for the next few months. So keep an eye locked here, and I will see each and every one of you next time.